Nice to meet everyone. My name is Eugene Danilkis. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Mambu. And this is Jeff Stewart.
Hi, I'm the co-founder of Lendo.
So we just wanted to present you a case study today, where this is why we're doing the presentation together, talking about how Lendo brought a consumer lending platform to the market and how Mambu was making a part of that solution. So we're just going to introduce a little bit about the companies, kind of the business case of what the companies do and how we came to market, and then a little bit about the technology side of how we actually built out the platform and integrated our two services.
So Lendo has developed algorithms for extending credit to thin file customers, especially in the emerging markets. And our core competency is machine learning, and we knew to build these algorithms and to make them available to lenders all over the world, we needed loan data. And we needed not just good loan data, but we needed bad loans. So the first thing we did is we figured we don't want to get into the lending business. We approached a bunch of banks and we said, we want to make a whole bunch of bad loans so that we can build an algorithm. And they kind of laughed us out of the room. So it became pretty clear pretty early that we needed to get into the lending business so that we could get the data sets to build these algorithms. And that's where Mambu came in. We issued thousands and thousands of loans. We did it in multiple countries, Philippines, Mexico, Colombia. These were installment loans. They were generally about a month's pay in these countries, and they're anywhere from $75 to $2,000.
So Mambu started also in 2011. We are building a SaaS banking platform. We effectively provide an alternative to traditional core banking systems to help customers basically manage their portfolios of loans, the deposits, and kind of the operational pieces around it. So we started doing this in 2011. We're now managing about 1.2 million customers in about 31 countries as a platform for them, for companies like Lendo.
So when we realized we needed to get into the lending space to get this proprietary data that we could connect the mobile social data with the repayment data, we knew that in addition to the mobile social data and the credit data, we needed to have a customer experience. So we wanted to make it very, very easy for our customers to, through their mobile phone or through the web, interact with our lending operation. We felt that was core to what we do. We also felt that it was really important to be plugged into the payment infrastructure, and we thought it was really important to have the data clean and organized so that we could use it for developing our algorithms. What we didn't really want to get involved with, but is absolutely critical to a lending operation, is the plumbing. You know, things like someone pays you twice. How do you handle that? Someone hasn't paid you. How much is due? The whole administration and infrastructure associated with all the thousands and thousands of permutations associated with a loan, that's a lot of code. And we really wanted to consume it as a service. And thanks to Mambu, we were able to do that.
So Lendo kind of took the approach of realizing they're building all the pieces in the middle here, the schedule management, the loan details lookup. And this is obviously a critical part of any kind of lending operations, but not really necessarily their magic sauce, if you will, of what differentiates one lender from another. And so that's kind of where the conversation with Mambu came into play. Mambu is really providing the management of those sort of pieces here in the middle, and then helping Lendo to integrate out basically their customer experience of things like the user application, their credit scoring model, managing the repayments, and their own dashboards to Mambu via the API. So that allows them to kind of refocus their efforts back on their core business. So I just kind of want to run through a little example of really how the integration sort of works and look at some of the API calls and how this sort of process actually works. So this is one kind of potential sort of use case there. So if a customer comes into the Lendo website and he takes a look at the application form, Lendo makes an API call out to Mambu to get all the product details, figure out, okay, what are the actual parameters that a customer can have for this loan, which then Lendo displays back on their website. The customer then goes and fills out all the loan terms in there, and this gets stored in Mambu then. So we make an API call out to store all the client details, store the application details, and then Mambu will then calculate the interest schedule and all the different interest rates, the fees, everything else behind the loan, so the lender can display this on their website. Then as the customer then decides to actually apply for the loan, they might have a slider where they say, okay, we want to take out $500 over 4 weeks. They apply for a loan, and Lendo then calculates a credit score and stores this information in Mambu. they might automatically approve or reject a loan, or in a hybrid sort of model, then also have a customer that have a user from their side do a manual evaluation of the loan. So as Lendo kind of developed their model, they had a combination of completely automated decisions, a little bit of hybrid decisions, and were testing out different models with their own credit engine as they were building out over time, and then storing all of this data into Mambu. And then, of course, at the end, the customer can then choose to accept or reject the offer that they get. So here we'll just kind of take a look at a little bit of some of the kind of the APIs that were actually supporting this. So here, for instance, the very first step was Lendo posting a call to Mambu to create a client. One of the things that was also valuable to capture in here, obviously you're capturing all the customer information, but you're also capturing information about the data source. So you could later segment to see where customers are coming from, what campaigns they're running from, so capture all this data, be able to analyze it both from a marketing perspective, but also later on, I guess, from an algorithm perspective, to see where, which data we're using to calculate which scores and how accurate were the results from your different versions of different algorithms. So this was the first step of creating the client, basically. And then from there, you're also then creating the loan part. So as the client chooses different information on his loan application form, they're choosing how long they want the loan for, everything else around it. And all this information gets passed into Mambu, which then returns back a schedule, effectively. Mambu does a complete calculation of the schedule and returns back the interest rates, the payments, the due dates, everything else, which then Lendo can display back to the customer. From then, a few things can happen. Lendo has their own engine, which they use for coming up with a credit score, which they're using from all their social data points, which they're gathering. And they might push this data back into Mambu and keep track of the score. They can use this, again, as I mentioned, for comparing how well different versions of the algorithm were performing later on, and also, of course, for making just an automated lending go, no-go decision automatically, which they can then post as an approval. Or they might get people involved in the process and assign a task and say, okay, this is actually within this range of credit score, and we actually want then a person to evaluate the application, make sure they don't have crazy things like a fake name in there, and do a manual evaluation of a loan. So it's a combination of these different sort of models and processes that Lendo is kind of building up on there. And of course, over time, they'll be pulling information back out of the Mambu system, getting back information, okay, which loans did we disperse with which values, putting this into their own analytics system to see, again, how was the algorithm performing over time, and also just evaluating how their portfolio is actually looking in there. And as well, then, also capturing all the accounting data that Mambu is generating and extracting this from Mambu. So this is kind of the whole end-to-end sort of process of what the Lendo application was doing on the front end, how it was interacting to Mambu for the loan creation and kind of servicing piece, and at the end, again, pulling the data out for the analytics side. So Jeff will just talk a little bit about how this integration, as opposed to the whole in-house stack before, affected their process and development cycles.
So one of the key things is flexibility and speed. We knew that to build great algorithms, we needed the data as quickly as possible, and we needed the data over time. So you can never, unless you start lending, you can never go back in time and start capturing that data. So speed to market was critically important. And unfortunately, when we first started lending, Mambu hadn't launched yet. So we were forced to build a lot of the core plumbing, the basics ourselves. And it was always a side project, and it was always taking important, what we felt was our core, which is building the algorithms. It was taking critical engineering resources and dealing with the plumbing. Luckily for you guys, Mambu is now a mature product, and you can just tap right into it. But what was happening before we brought Mambu into the mix is everything had to be QA'd every time we made any change. It was a very cumbersome system. And as much as we tried to turn the loan administration side into services, because we were trying to move as quickly as possible, you always were making that trade-off of the perfect architecture versus speed to market, and it resulted in a mess. You really want your loan infrastructure to be stable, and you want it to be a service. So by using Mambu and transitioning to Mambu, we were able to accomplish a couple things. Probably most important was speed of iteration, which means flexibility. we're able to, in the past it might take 3 weeks to get a new feature out, we would be able to get out 3 times as many features in that amount of time, which meant we were able to try different things. And today, our algorithms are being used by over a dozen banks, over 2 dozen banks, by telco companies, by alternate lenders all over the world in 15 countries. And we're able to service and help their lending operations because we were able to harden our product through so many iterations thanks to being able to build on top of the Mambu infrastructure.
I think for us, I mean, at the time this was also happening for us, we were also a new fintech company ourselves. We were just building out the API layer around it. Lendo was actually really our first customer that was using the APIs. So we actually, I think also as a fintech company who was servicing other fintech companies, had a kind of a few lessons learned through this experience. At the beginning, Mambu has a full rich user interface, and in the beginning, that's where we kind of focused our development on. I think we're realizing that working with fintech companies, we had to make APIs a first-class citizen in our development process, which means pretty much whenever we were developing core functionality, we would always have to add the API support for it, and that was pretty much a requirement for working with companies like Lendo. So I think for us, that actually also changed us to become more of an API-focused company. Working also with Lendo was kind of more of a partnership approach because, again, we found Lendo was really, I think, our 10th customer. So in the early days, it was really beneficial to get them involved in the development sort of process and help us actually iterate the platform. And I think for us as a young company back then, that was really beneficial. But it also meant us saying no to quite a few things on the product side because the challenge was, and we talked about the ecosystem where Lendo fit in and where Mambu fit in, us really clearly knowing the boundaries of what our core product is and not accidentally slipping into the areas of trying to build out credit scoring or expanding it was also fairly critical in the early stages. So I think it was obviously a bit of a challenge to kind of navigate that as 2 young companies that were both kind of getting into the market and both discovering their own sort of models. But I think as a result of it, we came up with a pretty good kind of architecture for both sides in the integration. And I think it also kind of actually helped the 2 companies advance forward from a technology perspective because it kind of helped us to both refocus our own engineering efforts and kind of create, hopefully, better companies separately at this point then. Great. Well, thanks very much, everyone.